Hey class, welcome to week 5's lecture. Yes, we are in chapter 6. Chapter 5 is skipped. If you want to know why, I don't know. It's just part of the curriculum. Sorry if there was some kind of throw off this week on that. But let's go ahead and get started here. This week's very interesting in that you're going to be going over some of these terms here. I'm just going to go over 5 of these terms here: conformity, compliance, obedience, normative, and informative influence. This is actually a week where you do talk about some of the famous studies that are brought about that kind of talk about conformity and being compliance and obedience, like Ash's study. Ash has had several studies, so does Sharif. So there's several studies from the book and also just in general that both researchers have done over the years that are pretty outstanding to prove levels of conformity. Okay, so what is conformity? Well, you're influenced. Okay, so there's some kind of influence. Is all conformity bad? I'm going to go over that in a second. But you're being influenced by someone, maybe an individual, group of people. Okay, and basically conformity is a change in behavior, belief to accord with others. So like you kind of sacrifice the self a little bit, or you're not sure how to behave or act, so you just kind of put your faith and rely your thoughts on others so that you can actually conform to what they're doing. Now, the question begs, is it good or bad? I always say it's both. I had a student not a couple semesters ago met with me on Zoom and said, you know, after reading about conformity, I feel like I've been not brainwashed, but almost kind of brainwashed into being conformed into being a member of the church. And I said, well, that's not necessarily true. Don't think of conformity as a negative thing, because it's not. Think about the goodness that comes out from being raised a member of the church. This is where you have to disconnect the two and see that there's positive and negatives of conformity. A good positive is think about the influences your parents had on you on going out and doing charitable work, serving others. That's not negative at all. That's not brainwashing. That's not, that's not leading you into a negative path. That's actually teaching you how to be a better person in society and be a good missionary be a good missionary and service person in the church. So that kind of goes with conformity, but it kind of doesn't. But it's more of a positive side thing of being influenced by your parents or by church leaders and members in a positive way. So conformity is actually good. So for me, I was a non-member. I go to church. I conform to a certain behavior I wasn't used to before, and it works out for my life better. I don't regret ever changing some of the beliefs I've had before or some of the attitudes I had before to conform to and become a better person. There's also the negative side, following the crowd experiences. Those are bad ones. We can all go through a laundry list of those. You see someone drinking, you drink. You have a group of friends that like to drink, alcohol, or you have a group of friends that likes to go to football games and talk trash to other fans. You want to be a part of that group, you conform to it. So there's also the negative part of it. So, don't think that conformity is just all negative. Compliance. Compliance is a form of conforming. It's insincere and outward. Okay. So basically you're agreeing even if you don't believe in it. All right, you're being compliant. So for instance, you could be avoiding punishment. Okay, for instance, like following dress codes, or some students say, I don't like the shaving policy at BYU Idaho. You still follow it because you're compliant, even though you don't agree with it. But you understand why, or maybe you don't understand why, but you're just going to follow it. You're avoiding punishment. Right. Obedience. Obedience is a form of compliance. And if this all looks confusing, I'll bring it home. But being obedient is also not just a negative thing. It can be a positive thing, but you're being obedient. Okay, it is a form of compliance though, because you are avoiding punishment, like following commandments. Okay, you can agree or disagree with some of the commandments, but you're going to follow them. You're being compliant, avoiding punishment. You're also completing a task, even if you don't want to, or maybe you want to, but you're being obedient. Some of the biggest examples that I give is mom and dad asking you to clean the room. So there's an authoritative figure like mom and dad asking you to clean the room. You're going to do it because if you don't, you get punished. Police officer, there's an authoritative figure. You're going to obey the traffic laws. Okay, so you are being compliant. You're obeying the laws as they are. Okay, so when it comes to the negative parts of things, you have compliant, obedience, conformity. You have some that are good, some that are avoiding punishment, some that are not so good, some that you may agree with or disagree with. There's also one called acceptance, and this is the positive side of things. This is more the you're not being compliant. You're actually, through your own free will, you're actually conforming to it because you feel like it is the greater good of the group. Like whatever the group's saying or the individual saying, you're like, you know what? I fully embrace it. I agree with it, and you genuinely think it's right. That's what acceptance is. You go along with it. An example is you start reading scriptures, you feel better. You know what? Yeah, I agree. I love reading scriptures, exercising, studying. You might accept these things openly, knowing it's good for you. And so you don't feel like you're just being compliant, but acceptance is a part of conformity. Okay. So you probably sound very confused right now. So if you go to figure 1 on page 143, you see this beautiful figure. And in the big circle, you see conformity. And inside conformity, you have acceptance and compliance with obedience in the middle of compliance, right? So you're looking at this and you're thinking, how does it all come together? Well, it's all part of conformity, like I said in the previous bullet points. So acceptance means you're willingly going on with it, you're going through with it, you completely agree, you have no quarrels. Compliance means you're doing it to probably avoid punishment. Same thing with obedience, you're probably doing it, you're obeying because there's an authoritative figure. And I think that's the two biggest differences between compliance and obedience, is that with obedience, there's an authoritative figure that where you definitely could probably get punishment. Compliance is you're being compliant to things because even if you don't want to do it, you know, if you don't do it, you probably may not feel guilty because there's no authoritative figure. There's two different types of influences when it comes to being compliant or conforming. Okay, one is normative. Okay, normative means that you're conforming, you accept it, you're fulfilling others' expectations. So you look at what everybody's doing, you want to feel accepted, so you normatively do it. The second time is informative. You accept the evidence from others, you make a decision, it's a conscious effort, and you go along with it. Okay, I always put don't sacrifice the self. If you get learned through things normatively and you see other people doing things and you have a belief or you have thoughts and you feel like you want to conform and change to meet their expectations, that's fine. But if you feel like you're sacrificing too much of yourself and who you are and what you believe in, then don't sacrifice it. Same thing with evidence from others. You might see some compelling evidence and you still may feel like, I don't feel like being a part of that or being with that. I feel like I'm being influenced and pushed. Then don't sacrifice the self. Okay, that's what I mean by don't sacrifice the self. Always hold on to who you are and have some leeway. Don't be afraid to be back and forth, like be compliant. Maybe your friend wants you to give him a ride or her a ride to the store or to school. You don't really feel like you want to. You know you're not going to lose your friendship if you say no, but you willingly comply. Okay, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with bending and helping somebody out. Okay, but if it's something that's not going to be wholesome or conducive to the spirit, or something that's not going to be good for you temporally as well, you probably shouldn't sacrifice the self for it. Okay. I'm just going to go over 2 examples of conformity because I don't want this to be too long of a lecture. There's some that you could read in the book yourself, but one of the interesting one was Ash's study. If you go look at it, they called it the participants Confederates, and there were some that were told by Ash in the study to give the wrong answer to see if others follow along with it, while there was a public decision on which line was longer than the other. Under certain circumstances, 75% did it once. In other words, like they gave the incorrect answer because they went along with the crowd. While in other situations where there wasn't as much pressure, only 37% did it overall. So what this says is that people are influenced to conform even if they are given the wrong answer. And that's pretty basic and simple because we see that in everyday life. But go read more of that study to get more of what I'm talking about. This Sharif's study, a lot of these are pretty interesting. There's Milgram's study of experiment. That one, and this one I'm going to talk about right now, Stanford Prison Experiment, probably were 2 of the big ones that caused ethical dilemmas, which was now why we have an institutional review board that reviews the ethical parts of studies. Philip Zimbardo totally is one that still does studies and still reveals research that is pretty grotesque. So if you ever look at the Stanford Prison Experiment, that's okay. Be cautious with Zimbardo. He can get pretty gross. He gets into evil. He gets into really, really big evil. So there's stuff I won't even watch. I'll just read just to make sure, because I know he can get pretty graphic. Okay. But the Stanford Prison Experiment, there were actors. If you watched the movie or know anything about it, which usually by now you do, there was actors who were taken in I think it was 1950s, where they're at University of Stanford, where they split them up into inmates and guards. And during the experiment, they started acting like inmates and guards. They started mistreating each other. Inmates were being abusive towards the guards. The guards were withholding privileges to inmates and also abusing them. It caused some PTSD for a lot of the participants. And these were actors. Imagine real life situations. I worked in juvenile corrections, and when I left, I was glad I left because it was really difficult to work in a facility where inmates and guards were treating each other horribly. So take a look at those studies, as they deal a lot with conformity, okay? And if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask. I hope everybody has a good day.